What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? This is Fire Falcon 97. I'm coming at you with a video today talking about how basically to get into collecting high-end statues. So with that, I'm going to give you 5 tips and 5 things you need to consider before getting into this hobby. Number 1, starting off, you're going to want to pick a scale to start off with, from 110, 1/6, quarter scale, 1/3 scale. They each range. 110 is usually the starter. Those are the little mini ones that are about $80. And those are typically your Batman black and whites. Those are your smaller scales, so they're going to end up fitting in a lot of different display areas. You can buy more of them. Like I said, they're typically under $100, usually around the $80 range. It's a pretty good starting point. Next up, you're gonna have the 1/6 scale. These typically range from the Marvel galleries or DC galleries that come out to about $50, but I've seen them as high as almost $200. So it depends on the quality, the material, what it's made of. Typically the lower price ones are gonna be your PVC pieces that are pretty much mass produced. They're easy to find. And as you get higher, you'll get resin. I think there might be polystone in there and stuff like that. So you can also find those. Typically, that's going to include your lower end with the gallery ones, like the Deadpool one up there. A lot of the DC animated ones that I have are also gallery style. Now, on the high end of the 1/6 scale, you're gonna have the Kodabikiyas, like the Justice League ones. Those typically go for over $100. It's a pretty safe scale to start off with because they're not too high priced and you can fit more of them in a display area. So it's pretty much the safe bet. And then the quarter scales going up are the ones that you see, like Superman over there, Green Lantern, Daredevil. Those are larger, start at least about $400, and typically they're sold through specific websites or your local comic book store. I'm gonna do a separate video on exactly how you can find all these and where to pay for them and how to get them. But typically you don't want to start off with a quarter scale if you're not sure that you're gonna get into this hobby. You usually want to start off with 1/6. I don't recommend starting off with a quarter scale because all the other scales underneath are going to disappoint you at that point. Typically you got to get those on payment plans and order them ahead of time. Those are very limited, and at that point you're going to be possibly pre-ordering and waiting anywhere from months to maybe a couple of years before you actually see it. Once you go beyond the quarter scale, you got 1/3 scale and busts, which I don't have any. Busts are typically a lot bigger, take up a lot of space, but 1/3 scales are usually going for over $1,000. And that's a little out of my price range. Don't really have the room for that, especially in an apartment. Number 2, are you gonna be picking a theme? You don't have to do this. I don't necessarily have a theme. I have a lot of superheroes, but I also have stuff from video games and even a bunch of other nerdy stuff. I collect baseballs also, and I have them in the same room. So anywhere from video games to all that, just know that you're gonna have everything could be a little bit jarbled up together. If that doesn't bother you, that's perfectly fine. It's your collection. You don't really have to have anybody tell you exactly what you want in your personal collection. You're the one that's going to be enjoying it. It doesn't really matter. But some people prefer to collect a theme. That way they're only buying certain statues and sticking to certain lines. That way it doesn't end up spilling into this franchise, that franchise. Like I said, I'm pretty picky with the stuff that I like anyway, so it doesn't really bother me as much. I can pretty much stick with the characters that I love and still have a decent a decent base. For example, if you only collect Batman, you're gonna just focus on Batman and only Batman. That way you won't get taken off course with the Superman statue that's coming out, or the Iron Man statue here, or the video game statue that comes out over there. You just pick one niche and you stick with that. So that helps a lot of people kind of stay within their little box. Now, one thing you also have to consider, I'm going to kind of add on to this one also, is that you might think that you have the perfect piece for whichever franchise you love. Let's say you're a Incredible Hulk fan. Incredible Hulk statues come out all the time. There's always going to be a better one, so that's also something you have to consider. Number 3, space. You're gonna have to find a place to put all of this crap. Now, I live in an apartment. It's pretty limited in space right now, but that's something you have to take into account. What are you gonna be putting this in? Do you have Limited space, are you splitting it with someone else? Maybe your roommate or significant other may not like it. I don't live with my girlfriend. She happens to tolerate it, but I know that if we were living together, I wouldn't be able to have all this stuff out just in the living room everywhere. I'd have to put it in a separate spot. So space is a pretty big one. If you're gonna be collecting bigger statues, like the quarter scales, third scales, you're definitely gonna have somewhere to put them. You're gonna need somewhere to put them. Nothing would be worse than anybody who lives with you or has to put up with your crap freaking out and breaking any of your precious collectibles. You also don't want your collection getting all cluttered up like a really bad episode of Hoarders. Another thing to consider with space is what kind of shelving you're gonna get. Now, I've kind of not been with the agreement that you spend all this money on all this stuff and then put it in some cheap IKEA crap that's, you know, $40 or $50. So we decided to go with the Gladiator shelving because it's a little more heavy duty, supports a little bit more weight. I've seen stories of DTOFs and glass displays just collapsing like crazy. There's one going around right now that's going viral of a guy who had a massive collection that was wrecked by an earthquake. Luckily, I live in Florida. Earthquakes aren't a problem. We do have hurricanes, but hopefully my house doesn't flood. Does your furniture setup actually permit having this kind of shelving? Do you need to build custom shelving? Do you need to kick the kids out of their room and have them sleep in the living room so that you can put the display in their bedroom? Do you need to divorce your wife? Do you need to go live in a storage bin? Number 4, children/animals. We're going with 2 on this one. Let's face it, as much as you love kids and animals, they tend to get into things and climb onto stuff and touch things that they shouldn't be touching. It's just a fact of life. That being said, this is kind of going to go into number 2 a little bit because you're also talking about space and stuff like that. You need to find somewhere where you're going to put, whether or not it's in an enclosure or just leaving it out in the open. If you own cats, cats like to climb on stuff. I love cats. They're great. They also break a lot of shit. My brother and I used to throw balls around the house all the time. Accidents happen. People bump into things. People go touching things that they shouldn't have. Definitely something you need to keep track. I want like special security around my display with biometric security. I want it to basically shock people if they try to touch it. And I want to have to solve a complex puzzle in order to get in there and actually change something because I usually put stuff down and it kind of stays there and I don't like to touch it ever again. Number 5, which is probably the biggest one on this entire list, money. So if you can't pay your rent or your mortgage or your bills or put food on the table for your family, maybe you want to wait a little bit before you get into this. These are typically very expensive. Larger ones have to usually go into payment plans and stuff like that. You usually have to put a down payment that you can't get back. There's a lot that goes into that. Now, one thing that I suggest if you're able to do it, which is something I do, is that I just have a small amount of money set aside automatically out of my paycheck so I don't even see it and it gets put somewhere. And basically I just let that build up and then you can end up putting that towards your statues. Now, if you're starting off with lower ones like 110 scales and 1/6, that's perfect. You may have to save up a little bit longer for a quarter scale, and typically you do have to reserve those. All of these websites have payment plans that you can do so you can actually spread them out. Now, they do have options like Klarna and Afterpay and Affirm, stuff like that. But keep in mind, you still have to pay for those on a payment plan. You may get it lower, but that's also taking out a loan. So you may end up paying interest if you want to spread that out over a longer period of time. Now, if you see this and you wonder whether or not I have a ton of money just sitting around, I actually don't. As long as you're smart with your money and actually plan ahead, you should be able to make this work. It may take a little bit of patience, but you can still make it work. The other good thing, I don't typically like to do this, but these do tend to increase in value, mainly with the quarter scales. Quarter scales you can usually sell at a point. You usually don't lose too much money. Lately during the pandemic, this is coming out during COVID-19, so it's kind of ranged a little bit. You can sell things, hopefully not at a loss, but there was a point when the pandemic first started where people were just offloading things left and right. That's how I got the Daredevil premium format up there, is that somebody was basically just trying to unload it and I took it off their hands on eBay at a ridiculous price. So that worked out in my favor, but if you get a statue and you don't like it, let's say, like I said earlier, you get a Hulk statue and now there's a new one coming out, the good thing is that you can flip those, sell it, and then use that money to go and basically reinvest it in the hobby, which is a good thing. Like I said, I typically don't like to do that because I like to hoard all my crap and just hold on to it forever. until I don't really want it anymore. If you're looking to pick up a whole bunch of old Star Trek toys from the 90s, hit me up. They're sitting in my parents' garage right now, just taking up space. So, like I said, make sure that you can afford it, make sure that you can do it without handicapping yourself, and make sure that you're not living in a box because you decided to put money on the next Spider-Man statue that was coming out instead of paying for your mortgage or your kids' braces or something that your family might need that's actually important in life, like this stuff is not. So there you go, 5 things to consider. I'm going to be doing another video, like I said, separately on how to actually, where to find these statues and where to get them, as well as other stuff like that. If you found this video useful, be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching.